All right, we're back, and it's COMP1002, and it's week 1, lesson 1, part 2. And we just finished talking about the outline, course outline. And now we're talking about more of the content piece for today. And I just had a question. I'm sorry, and your name was? Kayla. Kayla? Kayla, great name. So Kayla is asking a question. So Kayla, you're recorded on YouTube now, your name. So by the way, all you guys are probably going to be on YouTube at some point or another because I'm going to ask you your name. Anyway, so Kayla's asking the question, like, so where is all this material you're talking about, Tom? And if I go to Blackboard, and bear with me while I log in. So here's Blackboard. Stupid passwords. One day, you know, humans won't have to put passwords in anymore. Passwords are inefficient. Okay, let's go back to Web and Internet Fundamentals for a second. Under Weekly Learning, if you go to Weekly Learning, there's going to be several modules. Right now, Module 1 is there right now. Okay, so if I click into Module 1, you'll see that I've got Lesson 1, Part 1, which I'm going to be covering right now, Lesson 1, Part 2, and then the lab that's worth 2% that we're going to do by the end of class. Okay, so that's what you're going to see in week by week. You're going to see a module that has some kind of learning outcomes and so on. I'm also got a section here for assignments. I've already got assignment 1 posted, and what I try and do is have all the material ready to go by the time we're in class together, right? So this is your companion, of course, to the book. So if you read the book, the PowerPoints, the manufacturer of the book, the publisher, has given me the PowerPoints. And what I've done is I've respun them. I might have changed something. I might have rebranded them for Georgian, right? Added a couple things. Eventually, I continue to add more content or whatever to them, modify them a bit. But they're almost identical to the book. So if you don't have the book, you can certainly follow the PowerPoints because it's like kind of like a short, summary of what's in the book. And I'm going to talk to it, and I'm using it as almost like from a pacing perspective to get me through the course, right? Because otherwise, I'll talk myself into a black hole, right? That's not good. Instead of talking myself into a black hole, I use the PowerPoints to kind of pace myself. And I recommend that for you as well. Don't read PowerPoints. And by the way, PowerPoints are supposed to have like 2 words on them or something like that nowadays, right? Mine are like reference cards. Like you're going to look at them and there's all kinds of information because they're not for you to look at them and go, oh yeah, that's what Tom is talking about necessarily as a diagram. This is just information. So you can always read what I'm saying up on the board here and go forward. You're going to notice that I don't do a lot of board work, right? I'm not a traditional teacher in that I'm going to scrawl on the board. I don't do that. I do have a tablet, though, that I may use sometimes to do some kind of drawing or illustration. The reason for that is because I want to save it as we're talking. Because if I did board work, and if I'm recording my videos, you wouldn't get the board work, right? So that's why I do electronic kind of stuff on the tablet if I need to draw something. Okay. So does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, good. Let's move on. So we're talking about Web and Internet Fundamentals. We're into Lesson 1. And I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint presentation now. There are some problems with PowerPoints when it takes control of my screen. And Hangouts on air. And I think one day they're going to fix this. But if I ever turn this thing on, if I go pop and turn this presentation feature on, Hangouts on air reverts back to seeing my face for whatever reason. Not sure why. And I think it might be a human problem that's like me, something that I don't know yet, how to fix that. And I will get to it. Just bear with me while we do this. So you might see this view, which is not exactly the most friendly view. You want to see the whole slide. So if you don't want to look at this and you want to follow along, or if I'm going too quickly, you can power up the PowerPoint slides in a PDF form that I've put up on Blackboard. Okay. All right. So again, we're using this book. And we're talking about web page building blocks. And we're going to cover, in this particular part, because there's going to be 2 parts, we're covering Chapter 1 and 2. And we're going to kind of move through Chapter 1 at a fairly brisk pace because it's kind of an intro to web and internet. And most of you, if you've been in this world in the last little while, have exposure to web and internet. So we won't talk about too much of that. Some piece parts we're going to be talking about are related to HTML and markup and all that. That's where we'll pause and talk about it a little bit more. But otherwise, we'll go fairly quickly. Now, if you notice, there's only 29 slides, right? So it's a fairly small PowerPoint presentation. At the end, if we can get through this within about 20 minutes or so, we'll see. If we don't, that's fine too. then we'll stop, and then that'll be a great stopping point for us to take a break. Okay. All right, so let's get through this. So we're going to talk about the building blocks of pages, and we're also going to be talking about things like best practices. I think for me, that's always been I think I've tried to follow. I come from a world where best practices were the norm, if you will. When you work in a government service, and I've worked with government lots of times, the process is more important than the output, mostly. I know it's kind of counterintuitive to some of you, but that's how it is. Process is important to government. You want to work in the government, you want to work in the city, you want to work at with the Ontario government, process. Keep that in mind. And so because of process, we develop these best practices, almost like a workflow. And so we're going to talk about the workflows here a little bit. All right. So when we talk web page building blocks then, there's different parts of a web page. And again, they talk about these three components, the text, references to other files, and the markup. So what is markup anyway? Right? When we say markup, okay, I'm talking about markup. And you might hear HTML. What does HTML stand for? Hypertext Markup Language. That's what it stands for, right? And you know, it's kind of an evolved language over time. It used to be pretty poor, right? HTML, in my day, when I first started learning HTML, and I was in university, I was like, and this is before the internet, by the way, when Netscape was king, okay? Like back in the day, maybe you remember some of that stuff. Sorry to say that, but we're kind of, you know, maybe I'm on the same, and ourselves, where I can just see a couple of guys almost my age, I would say, right? That might remember Netscape. Sorry, guys, for being prejudiced in this way when I'm saying these things, right? Forgive me, please. But when I look at this stuff, I say, Netscape back in the day, we were using systems where Netscape was the only browser that was available, and if you had any kind of style, it was embedded into your pages, which is really bad, right? But that's what we knew how to do back then. It was like kind of the beginnings of the web. Before there was a World Wide Web, and it was just called the internet, right? World Wide Web was something else that happened later on, and of course now we just call it the web, or we don't call it anything at all. We just want to use Wi-Fi so we can get access to Google, right? So but this is where markup came up. So I was always talking to my professor saying, I really want to learn HTML because it's really cool. Like you can program websites, and he's like, it's nothing. It's really nothing to learn, right? You take your content, you mark it up with some tags, and it becomes an element, and then now that content is going to be available to to a web on the web. And I'm like, that's all it is? And he's like, yeah, that's all it is. And hypertext is really like these hyperlinks that take you from one page of content to another. That's all he told me when I was first learning, right? Well, obviously it's not quite that simple, but the idea here is he's right? My professor back in university. We're talking now going back into the not to date myself too much, but into the 80s, right? Stuff like that back in the day when most of you weren't even born, right? So, but anyways, at the end of the idea is when you think about these things, is that's how the web started, and the web was very basic. It was just text, right? When we were emailing each other, I was lucky to be in a university because when I was emailing somebody, I was one of the only people that had email, right? I mean, that's how it was back then, right? So back in the day, there were no cell phones, right? Cell phones didn't exist, right? Yeah, we were starting to get them. They were big, but for us, they didn't exist, right? Like, it wasn't something that a common consumer would carry around in his pocket, right? It was just not happening, right? Or in his backpack. It was just not going to happen. So there's a lot of stuff that we did differently just because of that. Technology really changes what we do, and even now, the web is changing what we do as well, right? So yeah, I take your point taken, but it's really rare. Even fax machines, to some degree, were kind of, that was the leading edge, right? Pagers, I think, was the other thing we used to love. We had pagers, which is, there was no text really at the end of the day, right? So I want to frame it for you. This is where the beginnings of the web came from, where people didn't understand, and they didn't have an inkling of how to send information across. So when we sent stuff across the web, it was text. That was it. And it was blue links. You saw blue hyperlinks, and that was the style. And it was the style for all pages. If your page didn't look like blue hyperlinks, something was wrong, okay? And there was no style to the web. But of course, that story changed. Okay, so typically what I would do is I would wait to get you guys hand-on, but I hate doing like a download. So I'd like you to pull up your machines now. All right, this is a great point to start off. Because as I start, I'm going to consume some of the content that's in the site, that's on this PowerPoint, right, as we go, because I think it's really boring to watch me, and it's much better to do. So I want to kind of show you stuff as we go. So I'm going to kind of say for the Mac user, do this. For the Windows user, do this. If you're Linux, oh well. No, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say if you're Linux, you know, you can do some of these things too as well. And then we're going to move on. So what I'd like you to do is when you pull up your system, while we're waiting, I'm going to recommend, and I'm sorry, your name is? Keith. Keith was asking me about Dreamweaver. Is that a good IDE or whatever, or WYSIWYG editor to use? I'm a brackets person. So let's kind of pull up that for a second. I'm going to go to brackets, which is free and open source, right? So if you look at brackets, if you go to brackets.io, that's what I'm going to primarily be using for this course. You can certainly download that. It should be cross-platform. It should work on Windows, Mac, and I believe even Linux right now. And the great thing about brackets is it used to come from the folks at Adobe, right? Adobe was Adobe CC, if I'm not wrong, it was part of that Adobe Suite, Adobe Code, and of course this is the free version of their Adobe Code suite, if you will, right? So it was a lighter weight framework. Adobe's kind of, again, they're agile as well, and Dreamweaver is for a specific audience, and brackets is for another audience. So we're going to be using brackets. It's more like a text editor than an IDE, but you're going to see that there's some really cool features that you can use. So please pull up brackets. If you don't have it on your system, please download it. It's a really small download. And I'd ask you to do this as we go, so that way you're really comfortable with what we're doing. Certainly, because I'm recording everything, you can certainly go back and do it later, right? Because you can watch the video and see what we're doing. And if you're, I mean, everyone has a different learning style. So if you're the kind of person who likes to watch, great. I personally think that practical hands-on work actually accomplishes more, right, as we go forward. Now, if you've used brackets before, who's used brackets before? All right, so you know what it's like. Anyone else? So good thing about brackets is it's got this really cool live preview, like I said earlier, right? So let's take a look at that. So on my Mac, again, if I was going to look at brackets, and by the way, it doesn't matter whether you're a Mac or Windows person, it's very similar. It's the interface. So here's my brackets. If you notice, it comes up with this little example web page, and we'll talk about the piece parts of this web page as they go. So when I talk on the PowerPoint presentation about content, markup, and so on, I'll refer to some of this, like an actual live page, right? So we can see what it looks like. The live preview piece on the web page itself, and again, this is just a tool, right? I'm just going to make it a little smaller for my screen, and so I can try and fit this in. If I click this button here, this little lightning bolt, right? It gives me the live preview. It only works with Chrome, right? And but what it does is, I'm just going to show you this for a second on the side, right? And if it's kind of hard to kind of put both pages in here, but let's say, for example, I say, you know, getting started with internet fundamentals. Okay, there it is. And if I save this page, right, and if I go back to this, what it's supposed to do, right, when I save, it's supposed to be a live reload. Now, sometimes what happens is, right, just like I'm doing, see how I've resized this page, right? When I resize the page, the live reload disconnects, live preview. If I keep everything as is, though, it'll continue to stay the same. If I would just intercut between the two views, it would have been fine. So let me just refresh this now, and you can see that if I saved everything properly, yeah, even the live reload is dead, because it has this little. See what it says, live preview was canceled because the page was closed in the browser. Even closing or resizing, sometimes what happens is it does that. And see, even this, it didn't quite get my changes for whatever reason. But not to despair, not to worry, right? At the end of the day, right, what it's supposed to do in best practice, and I guess it might work for you a little better than me right now, it's supposed to update this page right away. So when we're moving forward, when we're doing some of the work that we're doing, I'm going to be talking about brackets or whatever. But what if you don't want to use brackets? What if you've got something else in mind? Like what if you want to use your own editor, right? What if you want to use Notepad, right? You can use, when we program together, you can use whatever editor you like. It doesn't matter to me, right? You have to be comfortable. If you want to use Dreamweaver, go ahead. Use Dreamweaver. I'm going to recommend a couple of them. One of them is brackets. The other one that I would recommend highly is also Visual Studio Code. That's something new. It's quickly becoming some of my team's favorite editors, right? And you might say, well, hold on a second. That's a Microsoft thing, right? I'm a Microsoft hater, so I'm not going to use Visual Studio Code, right? Yeah, but I want you to really check this out because there's some really cool things that Visual Studio Code does that the other editors don't do, right? So take a look at this. It's very streamlined. It's free and open source again from the people at Microsoft, and it's cross-platform, which is kind of cool too. So you're not just using Visual Studio now simply in a Windows environment. You can also use it on Linux or even on Mac, right? So that's pretty cool. And it also, the really cool thing that really draws me to use Visual Studio is it supports TypeScript native. And you might say, who cares, Tom? What's TypeScript? But really what it is the ability for you to transpile, if you will. I love that word, eh? Transpile. It's almost like transport, right? Teleport, right? I don't know what you want to call it, right? Transpile from one language to another on save. So I save my changes, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 it becomes JavaScript, right? I don't have to think about it. I don't have to have a separate compiler or anything like that. It's really cool. So another one is Visual Studio Code, which we'll be talking about. I might use this one for some examples as well. Let me bring that one up so you can see what it looks like here. And again, I have several that I use at the same time. And of course, I'm bringing up the wrong one. So here's Visual Studio Code. And it's simple. It's just like a text editor, like anything else. It doesn't have a live preview at all, but it does allow you to, it does accept different file formats and so on. And it's a very straightforward thing. Like right now, looking at this thing as plain text. When I save this as a, if I save this as a HTML file, then it'll change the formatting and the markup, the way it marks up the page to look like HTML. And we'll talk about that later on. Okay, so that's another one, Visual Studio Code. Some people, if you're a Mac person, you might want to use something like Text Wrangler. That's a real popular one today. That's something that a lot of people who use Mac, they want to use that, and I'll pull that up as well. So let's go to Text Wrangler here. So here's Text Wrangler. Again, it's just an editor, like a Notepad. You might like Notepad++ because that might be something you're used to working with or something. That's fine too. You can choose whichever editor you like. It's totally up to you the way you're going to go, like I said. It's not something that I'm going to force you to do. I'm not going to enforce upon you a certain workflow. I'm going to recommend what works nicely for me, right? Okay, so again, Text Wrangler. And you also might use something like Sublime Text, right? Because Sublime is also a very popular text editor, as an example. So let me see if I got that going on here as well. I might have that as well. Here's Sublime Text, right? And again, Sublime is very similar to, I would say, to brackets in that, you know, it's free to use for now, but then you have to register it. And if you notice, I'm using the unregistered version. When you use it enough times, and you can see that I don't use Sublime very often, right? And I've actually moved away from using Sublime and using more of brackets or something else. But it's a very popular, again, editor for Mac, Windows, and Linux. So it's cross-platform again. Okay. So Sublime would be another one. So there's a few tools you can use, and let's do a quick poll. I want to do a quick poll, see what editor you like to use. I mean, do you guys do any kind of programming at all? Any kind of anything whatsoever? And if you're going to use something, what do you think you should use? Right? So how do we do a poll? So we're going to do this in class too, right? Might as well do it now. I'm going to put together a little poll here, and I'm going to use polleverywhere.com, right? Which is kind of a free poll. So let's see this. Let's kind of talk about, you know, what's your favorite editor? We use the Canadian spelling, right? Text editor, IDE, right? We'll put a couple of them up there. We'll put some multiple choice in there. So let's say I'll put up there Sublime Text. Another one will be something like brackets if you're someone who already uses brackets. And we'll add a couple more. We'll say you know, Text Wrangler. But just a regular Notepad. Let's go put some more in there. Notepad++. put in Dreamweaver. Keith said Dreamweaver, right? Come on. Dreamweaver, right? What other ones do we like, right? Anyone else have another suggestion for a different editor? I can put more on there too. Oh, Visual Studio, that's another one I like, right? Put it up anyway and see what happens, right? So I'm gonna kind of create this poll. When I do that, when we do polls together, right? You're going to, I want to make it active. What you're going to do is you can do two things. You can text learn, capitals, to 37607, right? Like right now from your phone, or you can go to pollev.com/learn to do the poll, all right? And it's anonymous, so no one's going to get on you if you don't like Sublime or brackets or one of those. Let's just make this poll live, right? And now we're waiting for your responses, right? So you go ahead and do what you have to do. And when you start responding, right, then we're going to see some results come up right away. There we go. Got a Dreamweaver person. Who did that, right? Who could have done that, right? By the way, when I use pollev.com or whatever, I'm going to do this kind of stuff to ask you some questions about the previous lecture, right? So if I do, let's say we talk about something on the web as an example, and we might say something like, who thinks, this? I might have a multiple choice question, A, B, C, D, right? If I put something up there, chances are you're going to see it on an exam, right? This won't be on the exam, by the way, but there'll be other things on the exam that I might flash up here and say, hey, it's this. Where, which one is the answer? And you're going to come up with an answer for yourself. There's going to be people that kind of come up and say, I should have put another in here, eh? I should put other, right? Because I didn't. I'm sorry. I was remiss, because there's going to be some other editor as well that you might like. All right, so you can see where this is going. Looks like for some people, I don't know, either taking my advice or they don't know, so they're putting brackets, right? Which is something that they're preferring to use. Free and open source, like I said. A lot of people like Dreamweaver, and nothing's wrong with Dreamweaver, by the way. I'm not going to force you. Like I said, if you're a Dreamweaver person, I'll put my fist up again. All the power to you guys, right? Dreamweaver, right? It's a little heavy duty for me. Like Dreamweaver is a little, packed with extra features and stuff that personally for me is more than I need. Same thing with Visual Studio. Visual Studio I love, right? But the problem with Visual Studio is it's 70 million lines of code, right? To knock off a web page. I'm not sure if I need 70 million lines of code. It's just like too weird for me, right? So that's what I'm saying. I mean, everyone's got their process. Well, so let's just stop the poll here. That's enough responses for you guys for now. And let's do one more, right? Because I think polls are cool, right? Don't want to do too many of these. There's 20 responses that I have, but let's create one more. And this is one that I want to talk about too before we move on. Yeah, if I can type, what's your favorite browser? That's going to be some other kinds of things happening here. So let's put in IE/Edge, right? Because everyone loves IE, right? And then we'll put Chrome and maybe Safari, and probably Firefox would be the other one that we want to talk about. And let's put in Opera, because some people are Opera people. And you know what? I'll even put another in there this time around, just in case there's some kind of other bloody browser you like that I don't know. And let's try this one. So we'll kind of do this poll here really quickly, right? And since you've logged in, if you've logged into pollev.com, then you already can just answer the poll, right? So IE Edge is A. We got Chrome. I know, it's really quick, eh? Hey, Chrome isn't the be-all and end-all, eh? Like it's like, Chrome is good, but there's some stuff we can do with Safari and Firefox. Firefox is a very popular browser as well. Chrome has some a couple of others. Who knows what those are, right? I think you guys just did it just because I put other in there. See, that's why I don't like other, right? You guys are killing me, right? But at the end of the day, what ends up happening is you can see a lot of people like Chrome. Now, this is great, and if you're going to design for the web, right? One of the things we like to do is say, well, who's your audience, right? Is if you always like using Chrome and if you make websites for Chrome, this is great. And there's a lot of functionality that works great for Chrome, but doesn't work well with IE. And you see, I can see some people don't like IE or Edge, right? But let's see what the statistics tell us, right? I'm a statistics kind of guy, right? Because remember, I have a business. I want to try and make sure that we hit the from a user experience perspective, I want to hit those kind of things, right? So let's take a look at that. Let me shut that poll down before you guys kill me, right? And let's go into, I got a couple of links that I'm going to share with you eventually. But there is a, let's see if I've got this thing here. Here's a link that's a really cool one that you want to take a look at. It's called the StatsCounter, or globalstatscounter.com, gs.statcounter.com, if you want to take a look at this. This is kind of a weird time frame. Let's fix this. I'm going to change this to just Canada, or let's say North America for now. Let's see if I can do that. Not Serbia. Hold on. Maybe it's at the top. I missed it. No, it's probably down here somewhere. Was that at the top? Did I miss it? Was I too quick? Yeah, it is. North America. So there's North America. And then I'll change this from, instead of June 2013 or whatever, I'll change it to the last 12 months. So we'll do that. So September 2014 to August 2015. We'll update the graph, right? And we'll make it a bar graph instead of a line graph, right? And let's see what happens. Yours might work a little faster than mine, but the great thing about this is it gives us a couple of things. It tells us what the top browsers are from a global perspective, and you can also target markets like North America, right, to see what the popular browsers. Now it's going to take some time to upload. Again, this is a free resource from these guys, so you know, it's kind of cool. So I'll let that go while I talk. There are some people out there that when I give them some of these tools, they're like, I don't believe it. Right, there we go. Chrome, right? In Chrome, this is Chrome in all its glory, every version of Chrome. It's not just, you can't just say Chrome, you have to say which version of Chrome, right? So this is all of Chrome is the most popular within North America. IE though, right, I hate to say this, IE is number 2. So even though we don't like IE too much, going back to our poll here, right? Our poll, people say 2 people like IE, right? It's still the number 2 browser in all of North America. And in some parts, the number 1 browser, right? So we can't discount IE necessarily. In fact, I like to do testing with IE, because if it works on IE, it's going to work with everything else pretty much, right? Safari is kind of next in line, then Firefox. It's funny because Firefox in some places is more popular than that. Let's take a look at just Canada. So we've talked North America now, and I'm going to say just Canada and update the graph. And the reason for this is because we saw how Chrome was so prevalent in Canada, or in North America. Let's see how it stands up in Canada. I think it's going to probably be the same, right? But you'll see that sometimes Internet Explorer, because a lot of corporate customers use, I'll tell you right now, they still use Windows XP, right? And Windows by far is the most prevalent or pervasive operating system in the world, because it's been installed everywhere, right? And look at that, Safari is almost like a number 2. They're kind of neck and neck, IE and Safari, which is a different little picture than we saw earlier. Firefox still being number 3, and you don't see poor Opera anywhere, right? Why is that? And one time it was like the most standards compliant browser that existed, right? But it's not as popular anymore. Maybe a little bit from a developer perspective, but at the end of the day, not something that we're watching as much anymore. And one more, and then we'll stop doing this silliness. I'll do one more test for you guys. Let's take a look at, I want to look at Europe, right? So right now we've kind of looked at North America, but let's see what Europe looks like from a browser perspective, which is a totally different picture, as you'll see, right? And why am I saying this? Because really the browser is the viewport to our content, right? So who uses it and how our content's being consumed is done through some kind of browser, right? And as you can see, Chrome is a good test. It's a good test. If you can do it in Chrome and IE, then more or less you've conquered everything else, right? Okay, so there's Chrome, and look, Firefox is number 2, right, in Europe, right? Firefox is the number 2 browser, IE being 3rd, and then Safari being 4th, right? And then, hey, look, there's Opera. It popped up on the radar a little bit, right, which is surprising, right?
These stats, where are they being drawn from? Surveys or usage?
Usage primarily, right? So there is these guys count all the browsing that happens. It's kind of a neat little site. They count global stats of all usage over the last 12 months. They don't poll every second or anything like that. They poll. They have crawlers, if you will, to do different things, and they also work with Google Analytics and so on to kind of pull up some of this information. Okay, let's get back into one more thing. The other thing I like to do is when I look at browsers, and before we can break, there's no clock in this room, but probably take a break in another minute or so. Another thing to test is the type of support your browser has. So try this. Go to html5test.com, right? That's a good one to go to. If you guys, I don't know if you guys have ever done this before, but I like to do this. So my Chrome browser is scoring 521 or 555 points. Okay, this is cool. And then, but if I bring up something else, let's say, for example, I've got some other browsers in here we can test. Let's test Firefox for a second as well. So I'm going to put that up, html5test.com, right? And let's bring up, there's 467, and let's put up Safari, right? Because Safari is like, you know, Apple's baby, right? HTML5test, HTML5 rocks, I like that. HTML5test.com, right? Let's try that out. Right? There's Safari, right? And let's check out Poor Opera. Let's see how that's doing, right? Because I say Poor Opera only because it's being left in the dust. Right, so let's test this out here. So, and you can see how it's kind of slow too. Is it? No, I don't want to improve Opera. I just want you to tell me the stats. Poor Opera. All right. Anyways, so as you can see from a stats perspective, 396 out of 555 for Safari, much lower than what I'm getting for Chrome, right? Chrome is, it's the wrong one. I'm getting different results, is what I'm saying, right? So, you know, you're going to say to me, well, what does this all mean? It means that features of HTML5, and when we talk about HTML5 markup in a second, this is not even going. Poor Opera. Oh, hey, it worked. I apologize to the Opera people. All right, if they're watching or listening, Big Brother. Yeah, I don't apologize. Okay, you suck. And let's go for 396, and that's why people use it. So 467. I'll put this up for Firefox, a little bit lower. But 521 is like pretty high for Chrome relative to the number of points you're going to get for all the features that are available and compatible from HTML5, right? So that's really why a lot of people like Chrome, because it works on Chrome, right? Here's another thing to try. Pull up your phone, right? And then try it on your phone. Let's try html5test.com on your browser. I'm using my iPhone 6 here. For people who can't see me, if you're watching the broadcast somehow, right, or re-watching the broadcast, I'm using html5test.com on my Chrome browser, and you guys can see the number. It's 387, and on my iPhone, right, which is a lot different than my Chrome browser on my desktop. Why is that? Right? And you might see a different number. If you pull up Android, your Android browser might score higher than my iPhone browser, right, on Chrome, right? So 387, right? 405. We got 405, right? So, what do you got? Anyone else have higher than a 405 on their phone? 479. And what kind of phone do you have? Yeah, okay, and you're using the Android browser? Yeah, okay, so and you've got 518 as well, right? So you're up there, right? So you can see that my browser, my Chrome browser on iOS 8 or whatever, isn't that great, right? So now what about IE? Or IE Edge? I'm like, it should be better, right? Hold on a second. I don't know what's going to happen. By the way, I'm doing that for two reasons. I'm cringing. You guys can see it on the video. When I swap over to my VMware image, I may lose you. It might swap to my face. They're going, hi. Seeing my face isn't what I want you to do, but it may happen. So bear with me if it does on the video. Ready? Let's see what happens. All right. Hopefully it's recording this. If it's not, I'm going to pull up. Let's pull up Edge for a second. Here's Edge, and let's look at see what our Edge does for us. I'm going to say, you know, HTML5test.com, right? See what it does for us for Edge, right? Now Edge is improved. It's 402. Woohoo, right? It's great. It's fantastic, right? Anyways, we were promised that Edge was going to be better, and it is better than IE, right? But it's not that much better, and I'm not sure if they wiped out Internet Explorer here. when you upgrade to Windows 10. I think they got rid of it. But if I search for it, if I actually search for Internet Explorer, will I actually find it in my apps, right? So not sure if I will. Let's see if I search through here, if I can find the old IE to compare. Yeah, she'd be gone, okay? But that's okay. Long live IE. Goodbye Internet Explorer, I guess. I don't see a difference, guys. I'll be honest with you. I don't see much of a difference in terms of capability. 402. I was really hoping that it was going to be a lot higher in terms of capability for us with IE Edge. So why is this? Why is this happening? Remember, I got a pretty good number with on the Mac side with with Chrome. Let's see what I get with on the Windows side. I got 526, right? So 521. So actually, it's actually better on the Windows side is what it's reporting than it is on the Mac. So just a few things to think about. So again, we talked about browsers this morning. We talked about editors and so on, how to work with the stuff that we're going to be working with over the next 14 weeks and so on, right? And I'm kind of putting up some stats for you. I know some people are shifting around. You need your coffee. Bear with me for 2 more minutes. I'm putting up some stats for you so you understand what people are using out there, as well as what you'd like to use here in the class. And then we can look at some stats saying, well, how effective are the tools that we're using in terms of compliance, from a compliance perspective with the HTML5 standards that are out there, right? So just information sharing at this point, and trying to frame the web for you in some ways. We're going to continue to do that today. I'm going to give you more and more links like this to test things out. Some of these links I'm going to pop up on Blackboard, so you can always go back and say, what was that link that he used for this? It's going to be on Blackboard. It might be in my PowerPoint presentations as well. But I think this is a great stopping place for coffee. I know for me it is, right? Let's just knock some of this down, and let's see if I can get to the place where I can stop recording my stuff. It's way down here, sure. So when we're done, this piece, what I'll do is we'll talk about we'll actually go into the PowerPoint a little bit more, but I want you to follow along. So when I pull my PowerPoint up from now, as we finish the rest of today, then I want you to knock around what I'm doing in there. I want you to try the stuff that I'm doing as we go on, as opposed to you watching. Okay, so let's stop recording now, take a short break, 10, 15 minutes max, and then we'll come back and continue.